Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to this night-ending bonus upload. Before we jump on into it, a couple quick links. As many of you may know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. These audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click the bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because all of these things, they really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter and are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's bonus, shall we? I received an email. The heading said, former Marine, channel comment lurker, live stream lurker, not a troll. So I was curious immediately. And the body of the email was real small. Former Marine, I have some very interesting information I'd like to share with you. There are some restrictions. Please reach out as soon as possible. And so, a phone number. And I called him up. How you doing? Jeff, how are you? Recognize my voice right off. And we got to talking, and he was involved in a training exercise turned live fire kind of assault in California. Because of anonymity, the name will not be used. His name will not be used. His rank will not be used. As well as the exact date. And then as we talked, he said, I know that if they are listening, chances are they're not going to know it was me that told this, but they will know exactly what you are talking about 100%. Not even sharing the date. So it's just this happened just outside of Lost Canyon, California. These guys were on a Marine Corps mountain warfare training out of Bridgeport, California. And they had been doing their exercise training. There was 2 teams out there, 13. For those of you who were Marines, you will know exactly what I'm going to say. There were 13 men in each team, split into 3 teams of 4 and 1 team leader. So there was 2 teams training together at this Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Training Center. They had been there for about a week. It was routine up until a certain time and date, which for his anonymity and his safety, we can't mention. They will, like he said, they will figure it out if they do listen. And he said he has a real sneaky suspicion that they listen to any kind of YouTube platform that talks about cryptids, talks about UFO, any kind of secret society stuff that the armed forces as a whole have certain divisions dedicated right for that. The Marine Corps work with he doesn't think that the Marines do, but the Navy and the Air Force definitely do, and the Army of course does. That monitor internet kind of stuff, like what we talk about here. And he said, it's not just one channel, it's the broad kind of that they monitor. And anytime certain kind of flag words pop up, they will listen. And he knows that for a fact because he had a friend that worked in the Air Force that was his position, was monitoring internet activity and stuff like that. So they had been training, just, learning, obviously, mountain warfare. It was before, I can give you this much, it was in the time that it was needed. We were amping up and already in Afghanistan, so it was pre-2000, right around that time. And they had been going through all these drills and stuff, and they had gotten called into a briefing room, both teams. So 26 men in total. 2 team leaders, 24 Marines. Now, what they were told was that just outside of Lost Canyon, there's a hiking area, Mokalami Peak. And if I massacred that, I apologize, Mokalami. And apparently there had been 4 hikers out there that had been hiking, camping, were attacked, and 3 made it out. Barely 3 made it out. And of course, the grumblings were, well, why can't the forestry services handle this? They really couldn't question, obviously. It's their job and they're Marines. They don't question, they just go. But amongst themselves, they can question each other. What do you think's going on? So they get the briefing, they get kind of situated with where they are going to be. Now, this peak, Mokalami, is kind of situated deep in California. I believe it's part of the Sierra Nevada or part of the, was it the Toyabe and Humboldt mountain range? It's in that area, and he couldn't remember. He just remembers that those are the 2. He wasn't, he's not from California, and that's not where he was stationed out of. They were just training there. So they end up being told that they're going to kind of start this whatever hunt. They're tracking something, and apparently the Forestry Service need some assistance. Now, right there is a red flag for everyone that was in that room that day, including the two team leaders who, as everything's getting told to these men, they have a look of like, not shock, but this is all very strange. They kind of meet in this area called Salt Springs Reservoir and Lower Bear River Reservoir. And they're going to push into the Mukalami Peak. So where they are going in, they are kind of pushing, was it like northeast, he said. Not too far northeast, but more east than northeast, into this mountain range. Now, they're told, first and foremost, that the terrain is rugged. There are caves there. We feel that you guys are adequate enough. You've been training for this. Let's get, some more experience while not on the battlefield. So they're getting all their gear ready. One of the one of the team leaders says, because of course these guys are now questioning, they're no longer in front of the superiors. They're like, what the hell are we going to do? What could we possibly be needed for on American soil? And, how often does this happen? Every question for a 20-year-old that is completely confused would have. One of the guys just says, I don't know. I heard something along the lines of, we are going to be engaging in a large creature. Think Bigfoot, but bigger. They're all like, what the hell does that mean? No one at this point knows anything. The two team leaders are then called right before, about an hour and a half before they're going to deploy to the area. Two team leaders are called. One comes back. So now it is 25 men in total. And it wasn't the one that said, think Bigfoot, but bigger. They get out to the location, and he remembers they had to hike in from an area called Blood Ridge, which was, the name stuck with him because he was like, this does not feel good. This does not sound good. We're hiking in from Blood Ridge, heading into limbo. They get to an area just past North Fork Trail, and they get to the tip of the Salt Spring Reservoir. At that point, they're told by comms to wait. Do not engage in anything. Wait until further instructions come in. About 3 hours goes by, and 3 other Marines come in. They are Marines, but they're nobody that anyone knows. None of these, the team leader has no idea who these guys are. They've never been seen. It's just, and obviously you're not going to know every Marine, but there was something off about these three men. He said we were all 20 something years old, full of just piss and vinegar. He said, but these three men were a totally different caliber of what a Marine is. He said, these guys are basically what, that old commercial with the Marine fighting the dragon represented. They all kind of converge. The one head of this three Marine team meets with the team leader. They discuss what's going on, and they start to hike into the Mokalami Peak area. They're not going to the peak. They're hiking kind of straight up into just this real deep wilderness. There's a lot of granite rock in there. There's just a lot of areas where you could be hurt. So as they're hiking in, the leader of the three-man team, who obviously outranks anyone there, is now in charge of this operation. He tells, this is how we are going to be in formation hiking into here. Everyone needs to be hyper aware of all of your surroundings. In case we all have live ammunition. If it comes down to, and there is you have to, discharge your weapon, make sure your teammate in front of you or behind you is not in the way of that round. At this point, everyone, he's like, what the hell are we getting into? They can't communicate with each other at that point, you can, but you can't, so they are then broken down into two lines. They're about 100 feet apart. And there's 24 of the original Mountain Corps warfare training members of that. So there's 12. Two of the men that came in that three-man team are in the back of that. So you've got a line of 12 and another line of 12, 100 feet apart, of men who have been training together for about 8 days. They're fairly familiar with each other. They've known each other. They trust each other. They don't know these two guys that are behind them, though. All right. Now, in the front is the team leader and the man that was in charge of the whole operation. They get hiking from the head of this salt spring reservoir, and they are going straight into this just rocky terrain, but it's woods too. There's deep woods, but it's rocky terrain. They hike for about 4 hours in before they kind of stop. It's, like I said, there's a lot of woods, there's a lot of crevices, there's a lot of crevices that have filled with water that are ponds, but they're just real weird looking. That's what he said. He's from an area in the United States where ponds are, look like ponds. He said they were ponds. They weren't man-made, but they didn't look like a pond from where I was from. They're a mountain pond. These crevices that have filled with water over hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years. Now, they get to a location where they stop, they break. They can now communicate, talk to each other. Two guys that were behind the two lines had been talking to each other quietly, but not quiet enough, because about 4 of the other Marines that were in the tail of the formation, the two formations, had overheard these guys talking. Now, where the gentleman that I spoke to, he was not middle, but more or less closer to the front of the line. So these 4 guys are now talking to their fellow teammates who they are familiar with. And they hear, these 2 guys saying, I hope that we are not, hunting down one of those werewolf creatures. And they're kind of telling each other this. The Marines are not the other 2 are now, the 2 in the back are now with their leader, the main guy. And the 25 are just, they're all in one big area, but they're broken down and talking and eating something, drinking, maintaining. So the conversation amongst a few of these guys are, what the hell does these idiots mean by werewolf? Are they busting our balls? Chuckling and stuff. Team leader for these 25 is now in the conversation. And he said, listen, I'm not supposed to say anything of what we are going after, but there were 4 hikers, 3 made it out. They are barely clinging to life, these 3. But there is something in this mountain range, in this area, that is very deadly, very violent. He said, the question came up, where are the forest rangers? Forest rangers are not involved in this. They are the ones that called us in. Actually, they're the ones that called these 3 in. We were brought in for added support. Okay, so, how do we know what we are going to shoot, what we are hunting, what the hell, and why are these guys saying werewolf? That's the, whole gist of that conversation. Well, they get refreshed and they start moving up a little ways into this mountain range. They hiked for about another hour, and at about that 1 hour mark is where shit hit the fan. They had been in this area a total of about 7.5 hours waiting for, they had to wait for these 3 guys to come in, and then the hike in, and then the break, and then the hour walk. So they hear just this roar out of nowhere. they're surrounded by wilderness and rock formations, and this roar kind of just echoes through the forest all around them. Naturally, everyone in the two lines are now freaked out. They're spinning around, looking at each other like, what the hell did we just hear? It was not a growlish roar. It was just this very bassy, terrifying roar. He said, I've never heard anything like it prior or after. He said, but I know when people talk about Bigfoot and Dogman and how they feel something in their chest, he said, we could feel it through our bodies. He said a couple of the guys had said that they almost urinated on themselves because of the roar, the bass of it. Not out of fear, hopefully not, he said, but, because we're Marines. But out of the bass, out of just this terrible body-shaking roar. The team leader falls back into a kind of V pattern, and they are told to spread out no further than 200 feet, the last two guys in the back, which are now just the team members. Those other two guys fanned off of that, team leaders in the front, and the gentleman who was in charge of the three men is 15 to 20 feet ahead of the team leader. So picture a V formation about 200 feet apart at the very base of it, and then at a point with team leader and then this very high-ranking Marine. Two men about 20 feet off of that 200 feet there, and they are now proceeding to go into this area where the forest kind of got less dense, but the rocky terrain was much worse. And they're walking up. They do not have the upper advantage. They do not have, the high point of the fight. Which everyone now, after this mountain training exercise that they've been, knows that that's not a good thing. You always want to have the upper advantage. Nothing is said except safety's off, and if you hear this man in the front shoot, see where he's shooting and shoot. If you see the two men in the back shoot as well, follow their lead and shoot. Do not break formation. Stay in this V, whatever you do. Now, at this point, they're all looking around them. He remembers looking at his team leader and then looking at the higher ranking Marine that was in charge of the whole operation. He said he watched what he was doing the whole time they were in this formation. He followed his line of sight wherever kind of he went. He said, we got to this kind of high point but not the highest point, and we saw movement. We were told to stop and secure the area where we were. The men opposite of us were to now turn and walk in between our men. So we were in a straight line now, as kind of a curved, and we had, when we fired, we had our rounds, or it was a point of fire pattern that, it was centered on one location, and the pattern we were in was almost a semicircle, but not quite as large as a semicircle. The higher ranking Marine and team leader are now standing together and pointing, talking. You hear this really loud growl, just this loud vocal growl. And you saw this head pop up from behind this kind of creviced area. What these men saw at that point was something that no 20-year-old, no human being on this planet Earth should ever witness. The head of this creature was at least 3 to 4 times the size of our head at that point when they were looking at it. This thing stood up, and it was huge. I will tell you the exact measurements at the end of this exact experience. I'll sharing it how he shared it with me. This thing stands up, and all they see is this monstrous creature. It is hairy, but not hairy. Very hair from neck down. But sparse. You could still see patches of skin through the hair. He said, picture a hairy hirsute man, his chest, but all over his body, going from probably the chest, sternum area down. You could see that it was a male, and as it stood up, it took one step. The man in charge of the Marine in charge of the whole operation at that point said, put this thing down or we're all going to die. As they are shooting at this thing, they're shooting 5.56 NATO rounds. It's coming at them at a very fast pace, but it's only taken 3 to 4 steps. And it's almost on top of them. As it gets maybe to the 30-foot range, it drops. It falls kind of face first, and there's just this kind of thwack, this just really wet kind of sound. He thought at that point that it was all the blood, but they're now standing around this creature. The older Marine gets the two guys that he came in with. They are now talking to each other. He sends the two over to the body. They feel around, touch it, and it is deceased. It is put down. The Marine in charge of everything, of the two men, and of the whole operation, has one of the other guys come over to him, and he gets on some sort of radio, not your basic comm that they use in the field. It looked like a sat phone. All the Marines then are told, flip this thing. We got to flip this thing over. We have to take measurements. This, and that. It takes all of the men to flip this thing over. They get it flipped over. One of the two guys that came in with the Marine in charge, the higher ranking Marine, pulls out some equipment, and they start to determine measurements of this creature. Now, he said, "Jeff, I will never forget these measurements. I have only shared this experience with my wife. I've never talked about it because I've never wanted to think about it in that aspect of how I was thinking about it as I was telling you this." He said this creature, it was 18 feet, 9 inches long, or in height. Its head was 65.5 inches in circumference. That's huge. That is huge. They are then told that they now need to move this thing to an area where they can get a helicopter in to get this thing out of here. What they then do is they all have climbing rope, and they kind of fashion these crude harnesses, and they end up dragging this thing about, I'd say he said, a half a mile, eighth of a mile out, somewhere between. It was a long time, and it took everyone's strength to get this thing to an open area where a helicopter could come in and get this thing out of here. How they were going to get it on the helicopter, they had no idea. He's like, I have no idea. It took us all we could do to drag this thing. And there was 25 of us. We fashioned our ropes, we wrapped our ropes around its wrists, and we, had 12 men on each side. We harnessed, they fashioned the rope to, where they had their own anchorage point to pull it. They got it. They got it to this very flat location to where a helicopter could come in and pick this thing up. Around 4 hours later, a helicopter comes in, and they had been sitting with this thing for 4 hours. The thing smelled like just filth. A couple of guys had gotten sick from smelling it. It was a very overpowering, musky kind of just... He said if he had to guess what a cow's asshole smelled like, he said that's what this thing probably smelled like. He said it smelled so bad, Jeff. It was the filthiest stink he has ever smelled. He said it faintly smelled of urine, and he thinks that was because of like the hair, the sweat from this thing sticking in the hair. But the smell was just like, it was a very overpowering, musky, rancid smell. A couple of the guys were making jokes about, you know, it's manhood, this and that. The helicopter comes in and it flies over about 20 feet above the ground. A cargo net is then dropped flat, unhooked from the helicopter. They move this thing onto the cargo net. 4 corners meet in a hook. It's then fashioned to, the hook is then clipped to a winch that's in the helicopter. It's winched up. As the helicopter and the winch are raising up off of the ground, you can hear the tension from the cargo net, the harness, everything, and it kind of makes that real tensed sound, that sound. The helicopter, of course, doesn't have an issue picking this up. It's a helicopter. I mean, it's huge. It's not a little bird. It's used to transport vehicles. It's a Skorsky CH-53 Super Stallion that doesn't have an issue, but the noise is from the winch chain and netting of this thing. They do not know he doesn't know the exact weight of this thing. But with its head size being that large and its body size being as big as it is, and then to drag the thing, you know, he said it easily weighed 1,200 pounds. He said this thing was just, on top of the terrain we're dragging this thing, you know, it was just a pain right in the ass. The helicopter flies away. Gone. They are then told, you know, let's get out of here. We're going back to the mountain training warfare area. And, you know, no questions, no nothing right now. Let's go and debrief. They're then brought to this debriefing room where they end up finding out that the man, the Marine who was in charge of the operation, was in 2005 a lieutenant colonel, which they all kind of were like, wait, what? You know, because it's not, he's an officer, but, you know, it's not unheard of, but it's not real something common that you hear. As they are in there, there is a brigadier general in '07 talking to them. They are all told and congratulated on the job well done. No casualties were accrued. Nothing happened to any of the Marines. But this is a matter of national security. And we are all told to sign these non-disclosures if anyone is ever found out to ever talk amongst each other about this mission that they were just on. You will be court-martialed. You will lose all rank and pay. And you will serve prison time. You cannot talk to your best friend, your battle buddy, your best friend that you were there with. You do not talk about it. You do not talk to your training officer about what just happened. They all signed their lives away. And, of course, they do talk amongst themselves. Their training officer, who was a sergeant, he was a master sergeant, had told them, do not, after this whole debriefing, do not speak about this. I will talk to you once about it right now, but after this, we will not ever talk about it. If you have something to say about what occurred, now's the time. It's us. It's us 25. Get it out now and move on. What did we just kill? Was that a Bigfoot? Who were those 3 Marines? I don't know who those 3 are. They are some sort of special team in the Marines that is above my pay grade, above anything that I am capable of knowing, he responds. And no, that was not a Bigfoot. That was a giant. And they all kind of looked at each other and, giant? What do you mean, giant? Goliath. There are more of these things throughout the world. There are more of them in the United States. We don't know how many, but this thing would have never ever have even come to our attention if it hadn't attacked the 4 hiker campers. If it had just did nothing to, bring attention to itself, it probably would still be in those mountains. But because of the public, we had to go and take care of it. And that is the last we are going to talk about it. Understood. Understood. And that is what this man shared with me. He has never said a word to it about this mission except to his wife. after they had been married and after they have had 2 kids. He has never spoken to any of his, none of his other, team members, teammates ever talked about it. He does speak to a couple of his former Marine buddies that were there that day. They've never ever brought it up again. He has been wanting to share that experience, but just really didn't have the courage to do so. And I said, it does take a lot of courage, especially in the predicament that you are putting yourself into right now. He said, this is, years ago. I'm a hell of a lot older than I was. There's also 25 of us that know this experience. It'd take him a little while to get to me, he said. And, he is a firm believer that right now we talked about this, he thinks we are in the beginning of the end. This is a biblical sign where these creatures are now coming out, making themselves known. He's a very religious person. He had never went to church growing up in his life. After this experience, he became very religious, just a devout Christian, and he is wholeheartedly believes that these things are not natural. They are quite possibly Nephilim. But he needed to get this out so he could, move on. I needed to move on. I've held on to this story for so long that I needed to share this. And I've heard Dogman encounters. He said he remembers hearing about the 2 Marines, the one that had it by Camp Lejeune, and then the other Marine that was overseas that saw that chimera looking thing. He said it was time that I got my experience out there, because he knows and was told for a fact that there are more of these giant humanoid monsters throughout the United States, throughout the world. Our government definitely knows about them. And they are just burying it deeper and deeper, even though they know that we are, at the cusp of this crazy war that we're about to have with these creatures. He said that when he heard the chimera story, he almost emailed me about a year ago, but he just couldn't get the stones to do it. And I said, I thank you for your service, first and foremost, but thank you for sharing this with me. Insane. And he says, well, it's time to go. Hopefully tonight I can sleep without having any kind of dream about this, about that evening, because it was about evening time. It was about 6:30, 7 o'clock when shit hit the fan. So, but yeah, insane. I thought when he emailed me, it was, Dogman experience, Camp Lejeune. Because the guy that I spoke to a while ago said, there's many in Camp Lejeune, yada yada. I was not ready for a Nephilim, a giant encounter. And I've, just like many of you have heard, I've heard tales of these giants living in national parks. So that was the first part of this upload. Now here are the updates to this just amazing experience. The Marine that shared this experience with us a couple months back really appreciated that and reached out and said, I had listened to the upload. I really liked it. You did a great job, but there's a couple things that I want you to correct and a couple things that I left out. And one is my pronunciation of the name, the area. Mukalami is the area where that occurred, or the event occurred, which, while Mukalami Peak stands much lower than its neighbors in the Mukalami Wilderness, it makes up for the lack of its height and vistas. The peak is situated in the southwest portion of 105,165 acre Mukalami Wilderness area. About 15 miles west of the Sierra Crest, it rises dramatically about 4,500 feet above the North Fork of the Mukalami River and commands views of the Desolation Wilderness, Round Top, Highland Peak area, and the Carson Iceberg Wilderness. On clear days, the coastal ranges, including Mount Diablo, are clearly visible. What it lacks in approaches, the summit views compensate. Mukalami Peak can be climbed by either the northwest or northeast ridge. Both are rather easy Class 2 hiking due to a relative remoteness of the peak. It seems only a few dozen ascents per year. The most common and quickest approach is from the Tanglefoot Trail head located in the southwest. The peak can also be approached from the Silver Lake area or from Mount Reba vicinity off of Highway 4. All approaches to the peak are somewhat long and will involve several miles of off-trail hiking. Winter attempts are possible, but if not, all service roads are closed, making for exceptionally long approaches. So that's the area. It kind of sits real close to the Nevada-California state line, and it's just south of Bridgeport, California. It kind of sits. To me, it looks like it's located in the Sierra Nevadas, but it is and it isn't, per All Trails and a couple of other websites that I looked into. Now, the name was one of the big ones, Mukalami, and he first wanted me to start off with this. Jeff, first, it's squads, not teams. You kept saying teams. A squad is 12 to 13 men divided into 3 teams of 4, or they can be called fire teams as well. So that was a big one. But when I got off of the phone with this gentleman the day I received it, I had taken a bunch of notes and I just wanted to share it. I'm not a storytelling channel. I'm not some creepypasta channel where, I have writers writing for me. I am not creative in any shape or form. I'm a researcher. I like to research. And when a experience blows me away, I'm going to share it as best as I can with you. And he understood that. So let's get a kind of refresher, and then I'll share the updates and corrections. All right, Jeff, I'm a Marine. I am a comment and live stream lurker. Anyway, I was involved in a training exercise, turn live fire assault. Name and rank and date all do not matter and will not be shared. The military/government, they won't know it was me, but they will know the incident right off. It occurred in right around Lost Canyon area in California. There are 4 Lost Canyon areas in California. This one is just south of Bridgeport. We were involved in the Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Training out of Bridgeport, California. There were 2 squads, 13 men each squad, total 26. Remember, Jeff, the military has operations monitoring flag words online. This was pre-2000 USA. I was already in Afghanistan. Training missions, etc. All men, both squads called in for a briefing. So they had been training out in the area of the Sierra Nevadas and whatnot. They weren't in this area yet. They had been training for 8 days. And so these 26 guys only knew each other for X amount of time, but within that period of time, they grew a bond together. They knew this was, each squad knew, hey, this is us. This is us. We're, we're a unit. We are us. Our 26, and hopefully we will be deployed together in Afghanistan and in fighting with each, aside of each other. So they get called back to Bridgeport to the Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Training Center and for a debriefing. Apparently 4 hikers were out there camping. What was stated was 4 hikers were out in the Mokelumne Peak and they were camping a couple days. 3 barely made it out of there alive. They are hospitalized. They are very, very near death. Forest rangers have called us in to assist with whatever attacked them. There was no kind of example or whatnot of what attacked these hikers. Also, I want very quickly to make this known that the Mokelumne Peak is, the majority of it is granite or granitic rock, which many of us in the paranormal cryptid communities know granite is a kind of like a conductor or whatnot for the paranormal. I don't know why, as well as quartz. Question, why cannot the forest rangers handle this? They question each other amongst after this debriefing. They're going to help the Forest Service hunt down something. They end up meeting at the Salt Spring Reservoir, Lower Bear River Reservoir, and they push northeast up to the Mokelumne Peak. The terrain is rugged and it is very strange to what each man is used to hiking, and he had made mention of there were ponds out there that were formed glacially, which they didn't look like a normal pond from the Northeast or wherever he was from. They looked very alien to him. This terrain was very alien to the majority of the men. So that's one of the things that they really felt was off. They were told, use this as a tool or as a learning experience for more training before you men are deployed. Now, as they're hiking in, they are having conversations amongst each other. What do you think's going on? Why are we actively, we are using active rounds on American soil? They're all confused. One of the Marines, and he wouldn't say who, whether it be a squad leader or what, but had overheard them or someone in command talking about an engagement with a large creature. And that was brought up in this kind of hike in. And that kept getting talked about. There are like 25 of us, 26 of us in total with the squad leader. 2 squad leaders, but now there is one main kind of running both those squads. Why is there 26 of us plus whoever the Forest Service sends out to hunt down one animal? I think it's a big waste of time. You know how 20-year-olds talk. I have a lot of friends that were Marines or are Marines, and they joke and get pretty vulgar sometimes, like most men. But they are the baddest of the bad, and they among themselves this is bullshit. This is a big waste of our time and our talent. We should be over in Afghanistan kicking ass right now. So they end up getting towards this area called Blood Ridge, which started to trigger some of the guys. And they get to the tip of Salt Spring Reservoir from North Fork. And at that point, comms states, wait for further instructions. Wait right there. Do not engage in anything until further information and instruction. If anything is to come your way, let us know and we will tell you what to do. Couple of hours go by, and these guys are now, they've been sitting here for a couple of hours. They're resting. They got a couple campfires going on. Just relaxing. They think they're going to camp overnight, yet they don't have a tent. They don't have anything with them. They thought, we're going in to kill a bear, a wolf, whatever. 3 Marines show up out of the blue. The team leader, or squad leader, did not know any of them. These guys are young 20-year-old men full of piss and vinegar. Each from these 2 squads are all in their 20s, all just ready to go and fight. But when these 3 other Marines showed up, they were a completely different caliber. And how he explained it was, these guys were like the Marines from that commercial back in the day when, we were growing up. If you grew up in the 80s, the early 80s, there was a commercial where the few, the proud, the strong, the Marines were fighting a dragon. That's what these 3 these guys were just something of a different kind of wherever, whatever. They've seen a lot, and they could tell. So the apparent one in charge of these three Marines starts discussing information with the squad leader, who is now ahead of both of these squads, what is going on. And at that point, they hike straight into the Mokalemi wilderness, and it is treacherous. It's also near dark, and it's dusk, but very treacherous. Like I said, granite rock, jagged areas, a lot of area that you shouldn't be hiking at night. But once again, these guys are on a mission. This is something that they're going to have to do along, someday overseas in the Middle East. So this is pretty much training exercise for them. The three that showed up definitely outranked everyone, including the squad leaders, their highest ranking Marine. Now was in charge of the operation. So the one, we'll just call him number one, is now in charge, and he's not even asking questions or whatnot. He has got the answers right there. At this point, for some reason, he believes, for information reasons or whatnot, the other squad leader, who is second in command of the two squads, when they joined into one, he ended up going back to Bridgeport for some reason. That is, I don't know. He didn't share that with me. I'm just going to make an assumption of he either hurt himself, or it was for intelligence reasons to share information. Hey, these guys just got here. Because after those three showed up, there were no comms used until later on. The highest ranking Marine now in charge, they stop and are addressed. This is what is what. Be hyper aware. We have live ammo, and be aware of your teammate position if we are to engage. He is stressed and confused just like you. Everyone is stressed out, because really no one knows what's going on except apparently these three guys. They break off into two lines of formation. The 12 Marines and each line, so 12 and 12, from the original Mountain Combat, each linemen who have been training with each other and trust each other, and one Marine from the three new ones is at the rear. So pretty much I drew a diagram just to show you how they are walking into this area. So they are walking in. The squad leader is here. Then you've got the 12 Marines. The number one is up kind of at an angle, and then 2 and 3 are off to the side. Make a V pattern, but have all the areas covered, which he thought was kind of strange. The main, like I said, number one is leading the hike. They hike in. Now, they are hiking for almost 4 hours. And like I said in the information about this area, these are long off-trail hikes, to get anywhere. in Mokalemi. So they're hiking for 4 hours at this point and moving quietly, slowly. A lot of shitty terrain, crevices, ponds looking strange. And at this point, they break the two into one line. They hear some movement and they kind of slow down and break off. Excuse me, I hit pause for a reason. Okay, so at this point, they are still in their V pattern. The two in the end, the two new, so Marine 2 and 3, who are under one command, now commanding the whole operation, are talking quietly amongst themselves. Now, a couple of the Marines ahead of them that are part of the Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Division there, they overheard what these two were discussing. You know, because they're not that far apart. So they're just chatting back and forth quietly, though, because they're further behind. And he overhears, you know, I hope we aren't here to hunt one of those werewolf creatures. The main 24 are now informed what the hell creatures. The main 2 are now informed that what the hell werewolves are. The squad leader fills the 24 in, so they stop. And he says, fills the 24 in knowing this is against policy. So they take a break. After hearing the 2 Marines talking, they stop. I had messed up, sorry. So they're walking 4 hours in a V pattern. And the 2 Marines are in the back. And they're overheard talking about werewolves. Well, they stop for a moment and to kind of recoup. And the squad leader is overhearing them talking. You know, I heard these guys talking about werewolves. What the fuck is a werewolf? You know, what are we here for? What's going on? And the squad leader then says, you know, this is against policy, but, you know, there were 4 hikers. They were camping. 3 came out. They were barely alive. Something very deadly and very violent attacked them. Well, where are the forest rangers? They were the ones that called us in. Those 3 are actually running the show. We are here as added support for them to take out whatever is out there. Why do they keep saying werewolves? And then at that point, they start to hike in more. They get back into that V position. They proceed to hike going northeast. At about an hour is when shit hits the fan. Total time in the forest. So total time of everything since they left debriefing is now 7.5 hours. They hear this monstrous roaring echo. And at this point, everyone is on edge. The roar was really bassy, not like a growl. And he states, you know, people talk about how Bigfoot, he's never had a Bigfoot encounter. He's never had a Dogman encounter. But people say, you know, I heard this, you know, growl or this grunt or whatever, and I felt it right in my chest. He said, people talk about that, but he goes, I felt this. We felt this roar. All of us felt this roar. It hit us, and it made our bodies vibrate. And they had talked about that later, you know, right to their feet, they felt it. In their heads, a couple of the guys had talked about getting headaches after. A couple of the Marines nearly pissed themselves. They formed that V pattern. And so now they are back in that V pattern, and from squad leader to last man is no more than 200 feet. So now, boom, you've got your, this is where this comes in. You've got right here your main lead, your squad leader, mountain, and then the two. The forest at this point is less dense. It has thinned out, but much more rocky, much more dangerous. They are hiking into an area where they know something is out there, but they don't have the higher terrain. They don't have the upper advantage. So after hearing that growl, grunt, whatever you want to call it, they start moving up to get the higher ground. But they're not going to get it because this thing is above them. So, you know, they're fighting an uphill battle, which in war is not the optimal position to have. You don't want to be fighting up. You'd much rather be fighting down. The only thing is said is safety's off. And if you hear me or 2 or 3 fire, you look and see who shot and where they shot at, and you fire that same area, and you keep an eye on your teammate, your battle buddy next to you. Do not shoot him. You know, but so let's say number 1 is firing. We all shoot that way. Number 2, we all shoot that way. 3. Don't break the formation. Stay in the V pattern. He watched number 1. So the gentleman who contacted me watched number 1 the whole time. They get to a higher part of terrain and they see movement. They hadn't seen any kind of movement yet. They've heard this growl, this grunt, and they stop. They are told, secure an area, hold it down. The V pattern is now going to turn into a line that has a curve. So at that V, they all kind of form into each other and are like this, looking up. With all rounds aimed at one spot where the movement is. Both squad leader and 1 are now talking and pointing. We heard kind of another growl, or I don't know what, followed by a head that came out of the brushed creviced area. It was about, from what they could see, 3 to 4 times larger than a human head. Something that nobody should ever see. It was unearthly. And most certainly 20-year-old kids, even though they are Marines, they are kids, you know, at 20 years old. To see something like this is not cool. At this point, this creature now stands up, and it was huge. It was a huge monster of a creature. The hair is sparsely covering its body from its kind of like neck down. Imagine a man that is hirsute, but thinly going from the upper chest down. You could see that it was a male for sure. It takes one step, and number 1 says, put this motherfucker down now or we are all going to die. 5.56 NATO rounds in burst fire by 28 Marines. It takes 4 steps and it is 30 feet away and drops. That is at least 840 rounds fired, 28 Marines, 3 bursts, 10 times, whatnot is, or the math equals whatever. So like 840 rounds were fired at this thing. He knows, or he figures that amount out because when this thing dropped, when it finally fell, he was getting ready to put a new magazine in. It falls face down with a wet, sickening thud. 1, 2, and 3 start talking amongst themselves. 2 and 3 go to check it to see if it is dead. There is a thumbs up. Number 1 motions for one of the men to come over to him, handing him something that looked like a sat phone, but not your standard radio comms. And then afterwards, all the Marines are told flip this thing over for measurements and info on it. It took all 28 to proceed to flip it over. It was that heavy. They get the measurements. The gentleman that contacted me, Jeff, the measurements are something I will never forget, ever. All 28 of us and my wife that I shared these measurements with, and whoever, if those guys had wives or whoever they shared it with, but he only shared it with his wife. 2 kids and a wife, and he's only shared it with her, and now me, and now you. Its height was 18 feet 9 inches tall. Its head was 65 inches in circumference. It's just an absolutely huge. The next mission was to get this thing to an area where a helicopter could come in and get it. So they all had climbing gear and fashioned it into kind of like a crude harness. They end up dragging it for somewhere between 1/8 to 1/4 of a mile, which felt like 5 miles by the time they were done. They'd been out there 7.5 hours, a little longer now. Flipped this thing over. Now they're kind of carrying it to a location that's rocky, bumpy, hilly, full of scrub brush. So yeah, they're beat by now. But once again, this is perfect training for what they're going to have to do in months to come, which they were deployed. They notice by the time they're getting to the area, they notice that it's got a very rancid smell. It was a musky, almost shit-like sweat smell. It wasn't like rotten meat. It wasn't nothing like that. It was almost like if a person hadn't bathed in a very, very long time. That musky, sweaty, but there was like a smell of shit because obviously it's dead and it had defecated. The helo comes in, drops a cargo net. They lay it out flat. They finally get this creature onto the cargo net the best they could, centered, and take the 4 corners, hook it to the winch that was lowered from the helicopter. As the helicopter is pulling this cable up, you could hear tension from the net, because this thing was huge, and the cable. The copter had no issue, obviously, moving this thing. It was a CH-53 Super Stallion, which is a very powerful helicopter. Its weight guess was somewhere between 1,200 pounds easily, going off the measurements and dragging it. We wait 30 minutes or so for the other helicopter to come in. They're brought back to Bridgeport to debrief to the Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Training Center. We find out that, number 1, the Marine that 1, 2, and 3 that nobody had ever seen before was an 05, a lieutenant colonel, an officer, which is amazing because he is out leading the, it's not rare. It's rare, but it's not unheard of, but it is rare. An 07 Brigadier General addresses them on an amazing job, no casualties, no injuries. But this is a matter of national security at its highest level. They're sat down, they're told to sign these non-disclosures. While on active duty, if we are found to have talked to anyone, even the men that was with us, we would have been court-martialed, lost rank and pay, prison, possibly receive the death penalty for treasonous reasons. This is a highest level national security. Of course, they do talk to each other about it. Their Master Sergeant training officer told us not to after this debriefing, to get it out now. What did we just kill? Was that a Bigfoot? They're asking the Master Sergeant. No, that was not a Bigfoot. That was a giant. Like Kandahar or biblical Goliath. They're small in numbers worldwide, with some here in the States. If it didn't attack those 4 hikers, killing one, we probably would have never been aware of it. But it was a matter of public safety in case it did ever attack again, and obviously national security. They don't want the public to know. That's why there will be people commenting, this shit's fake, That's why people, I don't have the books down here now, but that's why people talk, Tom Horn, Stephen Quayle are, to me, heroes. To me, they're information givers. But to the people on the outside looking in, they are quacks. But they're not. They're in the know. But there are those people, those plants that want us not to know about this. So, yeah, it is national security issues. Who were those 3 Marines? Above my pay grade and clearance. All I know, special team in the Marines. And yeah, number 1 is an officer. He's an 05 lieutenant colonel. Now, men, this is the last time we speak of this, understand? Yes, sir, understood. Only his wife knows after they had 2 children and were raised. So their kids were raised. He never talked about this until he was, getting ready to be a granddad. He held this in, bottled it in. He's never talked about it, even with the few Marines that were there that night, that he still talks to. And he wanted to share, but in his words, I lacked the courage to. Since his days in the Corps, he has become a devout man of God, just a firm believer in Christ our Savior. And when he heard the 2 Marines about a year ago, one from Camp Lejeune and the other that was in the Middle East that saw the Chimera, he then knew that it was time. It was time to share the information. These creatures are worldwide, and the government does know. And Jeff, after I shared that with you, after he was able to get it out and he heard it out, so more than 40 people tops that he knew of knew about this and this experience, he was able to sleep. Now, updates or corrections. Being young Marines, yes, we did measure the creature, and it was 18 inches, or 18 feet 9 inches. And being young men and Marines, we did measure its manhood, and it was 26 inches. We did not touch it for a girth measurement, but imagine a 2-liter bottle thickness. Its feet were somewhere between 34.5 inches. I said it weighed something like 1,200 pounds. Looking back at everything, now the more I think, closer to 1,500. Jeff, on the NDA, possibly execution, I'd imagine that being as a civilian as well. Because for some reason he remembers signing that NDA. There was nothing stated about when you're out of the Corps. And there you have it, folks. I hope you all enjoyed this bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you for supporting the channel. It is your support, after all, that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.